In this video, we are going to understand what is an RESTful APIs with respect to Spring Framework. The introduction to the APIs, what is REST. Next, we will understand with REST APIs. There are common terminologies which is being used: REST constraints, REST API model, HTTP, representation of RESTful APIs, benefits of RESTful API, REST and web. Next, slight steps and the annotations which is being to understand with respect to Spring RESTful APIs and steps. Introduction to APIs. What exactly is an API? Application Program Interface is a set of rules and protocols that allows one software application to interact with another. It defines the methods and data formats that application can use to request and exchange information. An API acts as a bridge that enables different software systems to communicate with each other. So the basic idea of application programming interface is to give one software application to interact with another. What are the key aspects of it? The key aspects of the APIs is to tell about methods and functions, data formats. This is the same basic formats will be used. Access and authentication, endpoints and URIs. API expose the specific endpoints, means what, which are URLs and URI that represents different functionalities or resources. Request and response. When a developer or an application wants to interact with an API, they send a request to a specific endpoint. So the request which is actually sent from the user side, the same thing as a response it will give out after the processing. Next is standardization. APIs are often designed follow a certain standards or specification to ensure consistency and interoperability. So this is where standards will come. So these are all the certain key aspects of the APIs with respect to different types of APIs which is actually there, like web APIs versus local APIs. You have web APIs which is actually categorized as APIs which supports for the web applications, and local APIs are used to communication between the software components within the same system. So it is like web API will interact with the internet and HTTP, the protocols like HTTP. There are various web APIs which is being used. So that specific web API can be used for the what do you say? It is basically a standard to communicate with web applications. So we have understood what is an API. So now we will understand about REST. Representation state model is a software architecture that imposes conditions on how an API should work. So the REST initially created as a guideline to manage communication on a complex network like the internet. You can use REST based architecture to support high performing and reliable communication at scale. Easily implement and modify it, bringing visibility and cross platform portability to any API system. It was been introduced by Roy Fielding in 2000 at that REST and architecture. Now, what is an architecture style of the REST API? So how does the REST will work? First we will understand there is a request of XML doc. So you have a request which is coming from the browser side, which is in HTTP GET. The URL will be in URL1 format. It will come to web proxy. Next it will come to the REST engine, which is an resource, and it generates a response back. So it locates the resource and it will generate a response. And at the back end where we are seeing with respect to Java web, so when it comes to a servlet, so these are all certain methods which is being used, like you have do get, do post, do delete. So these are all the lifecycle methods which is there in servlets. So Servlets is actually a building block for the web application development in Java. So in the REST engine will actually response back with respect to an XML doc. So now you can see there is an XML doc which has been given as a request, so the response is XML doc only. So as the web server will take care of taking a request which is in post, and when it gives back as a response, so when REST engine will check out, so as the response can be changed with respect to JSON. So now you can have, if it is an XML doc with respect to post, you can have response with respect to JSON. Next, HTTP delete, you have text document as a response. So this is how what is an architecture style. So you can have XML or JSON format as response. Here JSON or XML format, and here also JSON or XML format as the REST application is gonna run. This is an architecture style of REST. What are the basic common terminologies which is used in REST is this server. The service provider exposes services that can be consumed by the client. Client service consumer could be browser or any other system. Resources, say any kind of resources which is needed from the server side to the client, so it is called as a resource. Next is representation. Representation means that how it is exactly shown up to the client side or the browser side. If a specific resource is being used, so resource to be used and it should be sent to the client, so what will be the representation type will be. So basically there are three different representation format. We have JSON, XML or HTML based representations can be done. For different clients it may be a different kinds of request which comes in. So this is a representation type which comes out. Next, what are the constraints on a REST architecture style is you have client server should be a server and client. This enables loose coupling and independent evaluation of the server. Client as a new terminologies emerge. It is stateless. So the REST is stateless. So because it doesn't store any kind of information in between, and it is self descriptive only. Uniform interface. So in case of web services we use this uniform resource identifier for example of this. In this URL that is where uniform interface will be used. Cacheable, it is cacheable. The service response should be cacheable. Each response should indicate whether it is cacheable or not. It is cacheable with respect to REST, you are going to specify it is cacheable. Layered system, this consumer or this service cannot be directly connected to it, so you need to have various layered system which is being added to it. So you can have middle layers which can be added with respect to response and request cached. Manipulation of resources through representation. A resource can have multiple representations. It should be possible to modify the resource through a message with any of these representation. Manipulation of response through representation means what? If as soon as the request which is coming up with respect to HTML or an XML doc, so in that case I need to represent back with respect to various different other formats. So what is the format we can use it? So you can have the XML as an thing which has come in, so next we can represent it back as a JSON. So manipulation of the resource can be done. See, this is a consumer of a RESTful app. You should know about only a one fixed service URL. All subsequent resources should be discoverable from the links included in the resource representation. So there are various ways in which the RESTful application should behave for a particular fixed service URLs, and these are all basic constraints which is present on that. The REST API model, how does the REST and API which has been done with respect to the model. So you have any kind of application which is at the front end, you are going to use it is a client. So from a client you can have web, mobile, web, desktop client. So anything is possible. From here you are going to send an request which is of get, post, put and delete. So now REST API will take care of the all this particular REST based HTTP methods which is gonna take up with respect to REST API. Now REST API knows that how does it the processing can be done, and next from there the server will be taken care with respect to resources, representation. So what is the data or anything processing to be done. So it will be the REST will take care of all those things to communicate with respect to different kind of server, and from there the response can be with respect to the client request. It can be a JSON or it can be an XML based response. Now we will understand how does the hypertext transport protocol. So basically REST will work on hypertext transport protocol is HTTP. So it is a communication protocol. So it is used for communication between client and server. Allows retrieving interlink text documents, which is like you have World Wide Web, www. So there are various jargons which is used in HTTP. So the various verbs which is being used in that, you have get, post is most common, and as well as there are so many other things like head, put, delete, trace, options and connect. So various verbs. So from the browser side, whenever the request is gonna go, so you can see in here the request will be completely divided into three different sections. So one is your header part. Header part will have get, you have HTML code, what is the protocol type, number is a version is being used, from where host which is gonna connect, what is the reply it is gonna get, what is the content type which is sent, text or HTML content type. So it is also telling that what kind of resources have been sent from the browser side to the web server, or when it is returning back. So this header will have complete information regarding that. Next you are going to have the real body. Body will be actually what is being shown to the particular client side. So this is how the HTTP request and response will actually be formulated. Now as the HTTP request and response have been understood, now we have a representation. So as I told you that in a REST API we can have different representations, that is called JSON, XML and HTML. So you have two main formats which is being used, which is called JSON format, which is called JavaScript object notation JSON, and the another format which is actually an XML based. So these are all two main different formats is being used. So this is how it look like. So this is your XML base where you have different tags. So you have start tag and end tag. Inside, in between the tag, you are going to have an information which is being placed in JSON format. If it is being same information to be represented, it will be represented with respect to the curly brackets. So curly brackets will actually tell that this is how the data has been posted out. So you have a course colon, you have the specific information which is being used, key and value pair which is being added to it. So this becomes your JSON format. Next, what are the benefits of RESTful API? Simplicity and understandability. Next is statelessness and scalability. You can scale it to any level, and even it will not affect with respect to the performances. Uniform interfaces, which is being URI based interface you are going to use it. So that makes a huge difference that you are working with only one particular format where data is coming in from the client side. Flexibility and extensibility. So it is having variable ways of flexible coding, and as well as it can be extended, means during without changing any different representations, you can extend some of the features to it. Widely adopted protocol is commonly is HTTP. So it is basically, it becomes a de facto where the communication protocol is used to only one. So ease of testing and debugging. So it is the testing and debugging is made easier in that. So that is the benefits of RESTful API. Now we will talk about REST and the web. So web is an example of the REST system. That is what we need. This is a major statement which is actually there. All of those web services that you have been using all the many years, the everything which is actually there, which is all REST based web services. Okay, so you have been using REST, building REST services, and we didn't know that, even know that we are using the REST application. Why? Because whenever we are communicating, it is just getting an responses from the server side. So where the technology based responses used to come, but we are working on REST. That is actually we didn't know. So that is where REST is actually present in between. So now the basic things like how the building of web services can be done using REST is been known. Now in a Spring framework, how we have to go on with respect to the web development. So in Spring there is an you have a framework which has been defined, which is called Spring MVC. So in Spring MVC there are various annotations which is being used. So annotations which is like at controller, at REST controllers, and these are all certain annotations which is actually gives the Spring framework and project ready state. So where it needs a server, it needs various services or web application. So all those things will get ready with respect to Spring. So as we have known in previous videos that how does these annotations will actually help out to tell the Spring framework that certain classes are being used as a configuration. In the same way, the annotations whatever it has been defined here, it gives out an signal or to create a particular dependencies based on web. So in Spring MVC, the major annotation which is being used is called at controller, and the REST controller is as an other controller components which is being used. So as these particular annotations which express the request mapping, which can be take the request input, handler, exceptions, and many more we can use it. Annotated controllers have flexible method signatures and do not have to extend base classes nor implement specific interfaces which is there. So now this is actually a part of Spring MVC, and Spring MVC where you have REST controller as an annotation which is being used. Now how flexible it is this particular lines of code which shows you, it becomes an basic example how I can just use the REST controllers, REST based methods, and how can I convert the REST based, how can I use the REST based in our Spring framework. Now this is the annotation we are going to use called REST controller, and this is a class. Before the class you need to specify that the class becomes a REST controller class, REST based class. Next we have another annotation which is called get mapping. This mapping we are going to understand one by one with respect to that. So the mapping means that we are going to communicate with respect to the server is everything based on the URL based. So we need to specify that what is the URL type to call a particular method. So that is where you are going to use mapping. So in the mapping there are various methods or REST methods, as I have already specified. You have get, post, and delete, truncate, put, and so we are going to use get mapping. So you have to whenever we are trying to call this particular URL format mapping, we are going to use get mapping. So we are going to use get mapping to it. So this particular method will be called with this specific URL. This is with the get mapping, then this particular method will be called. So the whole structure is so simpler and easier way to work on. So that is where Spring MVC is giving us so much flexibility to run and write a particular program faster. There are various request mapping. Annotation is used to map the request to controller methods. As I have told you that mapping with respect to URL will come. It has various attributes to match, so we are going to use in URL HTTP methods, request parameters, headers and media types. All these particular things becomes an attribute for the request mapping. It can be used at the class level to express the shared mapping at the method level to narrow down to the specific endpoint mapping. And there are also the HTTP method specific shortcut variants of request mapping. So request mapping is a general annotation which is being used for any kind of request which is coming, like you have get method, get, post and all. But with that you have mapping things which is called get mapping, post mapping, put mapping, delete mapping and patch mapping with respect to the HTTP methods or the verbs which we have seen it previously, like get, put, post, delete and patch. Now we will see with a small example how does this Spring REST controller can be done. Now we will go with an Spring initializer. So in Spring initializer, how do we create a particular project? We'll go to Spring initializer. In that we are going to click on Maven base, and we are going to have the project called demo rest, and in the dependency we need to add the dependency which is called as Spring Web. Don't click on the reactive web right now, because reactive web is again having different web formats. So you have Spring Web, where includes RESTful application using Spring MVC. So we are going with Spring MVC RESTful application development. Uses Apache Tomcat as a default embedded container. So we are going to have a server which is automatically configured, which is called as Apache Tomcat. And now you can generate and you can download it or expand it. Next you need to import it back onto the Eclipse, and when you import it, all these Maven dependencies will come into picture. Means Maven dependencies will be downloaded. Now this is your structure for your application which is actually ready for your development. Now we will create a REST based application, a REST based class. Now in this I will just tell person controller as my class. So before the class we need to define a REST controller as my annotation. So I'm going to tell that it is REST based application. So next I'm going to tell here the request mapping. So in this request mapping I am going to specify that my URL pattern to call this particular thing. Next it is just get a mapping. So what is an URL which should be used for this particular method to be called? So I'm gonna give hello. So from this I'm gonna return string. So I will tell get hello. So we are going to go still more in detail to understand. So we are going to use get mapping to be used. So I am going to tell return So this is what we are going to return it for this basic REST controller. So we are going to use the annotation which is called REST controller. You have REST request mapping, and you have also understood that how the get mapping being used about the particular method. Now we will basically run this application. As I run this particular specific application, so it is based on the web services, right? So what is this is happening is it is actually getting an Tomcat server running and web services, web servlet context. It is keeping all the web based application ready, and my server is running. So now you can see that there is a red mark, means it means that my application is still running. So the server is running and it is got deployed with respect to this web project. Now how do I call this is how I will call. I can use the local host. So the local host, this is my IP address, which is actually server is running in the same location. So there is a port number, which is port number is 8080. Okay, that is my HTTP port which is getting initialized. So I will go with 8080. Then afterwards, what is my first URL? So when we go to the controller class, REST controller class, what is my first URL? So this is my first mapping which should be shown up. So class mapping, which is like /person, and next what is my second mapping? So this is an parent. You just think like it is a parent URL request mapping. So this is my next part of what is the real get mapping should be done. So what is my response from this particular thing? So /person /of person. So I need to call this particular method. So I'm going to use hello. So this is how my URL pattern will be defined. So now when I click on it and I press enter, now you can see hello from person. So I got my request. For my particular request, a response I got it. So this is how you can develop a simple REST controller for a REST controller with respect to the total working process for the web mapping request, and as well as REST controller which is being used. Thank you.